Dr. Anish is a trusted expert who has moved and inspired people and organizations with his innovative ideas. We are really looking forward to gaining some valuable insights from this session. Now, I would request Faiz to please continue with the session.
Good evening, sir. First of all, I'd like to thank you for being available and making yourself available to yet another Zoom session, and especially on a Monday evening after working. I'd like to thank you for that. And I'd like to start off the session with some basic questions regarding our team. So first of all, so data is undergoing evaluation, and business, government, and other organizations are unlocking value by turning everyday information into actionable insights. In this context, analytics and data privacy have a completely opposite correlation. And the more data we have, the less privacy a particular individual gets. So considering this, how can we find the right balance for this trade-off? And how do we define the degree of a consumer's data privacy?
First and foremost, many thanks, Kanika, for the warm introduction. And I am looking forward for this session. Great to see so many faces. Likewise, specifically on a Monday, which is the first day of the week. I know you must have had a long day with lectures and other sessions. I'll try to make it as interesting and as interactive as we can. So, Fayaz, thanks for the question, and a very relevant question. And as we understand, data is undergoing a dramatic evolution right now. Businesses, governments, and other organizations today are unlocking value of data by turning everyday information into actionable insights. And there are two key trends in my view which are driving this shift. The first is there's a lot more data available. Every 2 days, the world creates as much new data as in all the years to 2003. That's the level of evolution and the data that we generate. And hence the term big data. And with advances in data and analytics, there are vast sets of both structured and unstructured data which can be processed at a very high speed. Our ability to connect information, identify patterns, and personalize interactions for maximum result has reached a level of sophistication, which was once only dreamed about. And this is where lies the problem. Data analytics is so powerful that it can combine data sets to infer someone's lifestyle, consumer habits, social network patterns, and many more things. And even if there's no data set that's actually available, it can still reveal a lot of personal information as well. And not surprisingly, concerns are being raised about big data's privacy as well. There are fears that fundamental protections, once taken for granted, are now challenged by the sheer velocity, veracity, and volume of data, which has now and which can also be manipulated. Some argue our very notion of privacy must change, that the imperative to innovative and unlock value from data must trump additional concepts as well. But this idea in itself of trading off between privacy and innovation is unhelpful and frankly outdated. I believe it is entirely possible to protect personal privacy while using data analytics to reveal new insights and innovation to advance progress. Indeed, just as technology gave rise to analytics, it can also be used to solve resultant privacy issues as well. Back to you.
Yes, sir, that was an interesting take on that, and I feel that many of us had that thought that it was a trade-off, and it is quite refreshing to know that it's not, especially coming from an industry expert like you. And let me move on to my next question. Right now, considering the present situation, everyone is working from home, and I believe even at NatWest Group, a particular segment is working from home. And considering the sensitivity of the data that you handle with, how do you deal with the possible dangers of data privacy and ensure that it remains confidential as such?
First, to be honest, in particular, organizations must be alert to threats of unauthorized access of data, especially personal data. And more broadly, these risks can include reputational harm, legal action, regulatory sanctions, disruption of internal operations, and it can also weaken customer loyalty as well, all of which can result in revenue and loss of profit. But the biggest risk that big data possesses is the creation of automatic data linkages between seemingly non-identifiable data that can result in broad portray of an individual. Powerful analytics solution can link data sets to reveal someone's lifestyle, consumer habits, social network, and many more, even if this doesn't reveal any personal information. As an example, a telephone number or a postcode or a PIN code can be combined with other data sets to identify the location of a person's home and work. And an IP or an email address can be used to identify consumer habits and social networks as well. There are many other risks which are prevalent, which include unauthorized disclosure of information. That's one risk. Nudging in the use of identified data to profile individuals in order to analyze, predict, and influence their behavior. Outsourcing data analytics can make managing accountability more difficult. And secondary use of data also raises concerns. In general, organizations can only use individuals' personal information for the purpose identified at the time of the data collection. And using that information in analytics may be considered as a secondary use, and unless the individual gave an explicit consent. The overriding issue here is still prevalent of privacy. Back to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. That addresses the issue pretty well. And moving on to the next question. Recently, WhatsApp has taken a bit of a storm regarding the privacy issue. And so my question is that data privacy is and still remains a very sensitive topic. And when such kind of issues come up, you have to deal it with certain kind of sensitivity itself. So what is your take on the entire episode, and how, according to you, such situations be dealt with ideally?
See, Faiz, concerns about data privacy with respect to WhatsApp are not new. The app has run into controversies about user data being shared with its parent company, that's Facebook, ever since it was acquired by Facebook in 2014. But a new WhatsApp privacy policy that was released on January 4th, as we know, has really triggered widespread global alarm about the safety of user data. And let's get an understanding. The policy makes it clear that WhatsApp collects expansive metadata from users' phones, including internet protocol address and phone number area codes to estimate users' geographical location. More significantly, the privacy policy confirms that WhatsApp will allow Facebook to access messages that users share with businesses on the Messenger app, which will enable Facebook to further influence user behavior through targeted advertising. While most users of digital platforms agree to terms, conditions, and privacy policies without actually reading them, WhatsApp's latest policy has for the first time sparked a mass exodus towards other messenger platforms as well. In India, the unprecedented change in attitude towards the app is evident from the fact that the older users are also considering migrating away from WhatsApp. And in India, the move away from WhatsApp towards other platforms seems to be led largely by urban millennials who are in their 20s and 30s, many of whom claim that they have been uncomfortable with WhatsApp privacy for many years, but they are still using the app. And for many, the biggest reason was a single tweet on January 7 by Elon Musk, the chief executive officer of American electric company called Tesla. In the midst of intense outrage and debate over WhatsApp new policy, Musk's tweet simply said, "Use Signal," an endorsement of a messenger platform that is open source, similar to WhatsApp, encrypted, and known for defending users' data security. Personally, according to me, WhatsApp users in India will not care too much about this issue. What with privacy policies being generally difficult to be understood by the public, I think government and civil society must engage in awareness programs to make the public aware of the importance of digital privacy. That's my view.
Yes, sir. The millionaires are driving the change, but even then we are still reluctant to switch from WhatsApp to Signal. Many of us have downloaded, but we still don't use it. Yes, sir. So you have summed it up accurately. And moving on to the next question, it's regarding the data privacy laws that exist right now. While regions like EU are very stringent about the data privacy concerns, they have GDPR, and we are following GDPR. But India still has a long way to go, and India is making progress with the data protection bill. And with the onset of the data protection bill, there would need a bit of restructuring for certain organizations. So how would you see the restructuring taking place, and what are the other implications of this legal bill?
I think there are two parts to it. The first is to understand the data protection law, and I think we need to expedite that. India's data protection law has been languishing for almost 2 years now. And if India had a protection law in place, WhatsApp would not have been able to go ahead with the update in the first place. As simple. For instance, WhatsApp updated privacy policy guidelines won't be applicable if you live in the European region, and this is all because of GDPR. Therefore, India needs to expedite the process of finalizing the data protection law. Further, as a country, we should also use the current WhatsApp issue to update the already under process intermediary guidelines around data protection. And from a business standpoint, I think the Indian government looks set to legislate a personal data protection bill, which would control the collection, processing, storage, usage, transfer, protection and disclosure of personal data of Indian residents in particular. Despite its regional nature, the data protection bill is an important development for global managers as well. And the digital Indian economy is expected to reach a valuation of $1 trillion by next year, which actually means that it will attract numerous global players who need to comply with data protection bill. The data protection bill in India has followed EU's general GDPR guidelines in allowing global digital companies to conduct business under certain conditions, instead of following the isolationist framework of Chinese regulation as an example that prevents global players like Facebook and Google from operating within its borders. Well, yet our data protection or our proposed data protection bill carries additional provision beyond the EU regulation as well, and it's important. Because India is a nation state, it would treat the data generated by its citizens as national asset, store and guard it with national boundaries, and reserve the right to use that data to safeguard its defense and strategic interests. Back to you.
Yes, sir. Can I just have a follow-up question based on that? Like most of the startups that are present right now, I believe they would be like outsourcing and using the servers outside. So won't it have a bigger impact on the startups rather than the established players who would be much more able to adapt to the new laws?
Oh, absolutely. This will have a significant impact. Apparently, there's also a provision which was recently introduced, which has actually been widely debated and protested by the startup and fintech ecosystem, where the law makes it mandatory for the organizations not to share their data outside their own internal infrastructure. What that means is, if there is any startup and we would like to leverage on the startup's capability or the solution, there has to be data transition from my servers to the startup server. But the law prohibits that. What that means is, either the startup has a solution which can actually be implemented in premise in my organization, or I cannot use it. So yes, there definitely will be implications around it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for clearing the air around that. And the next half of the session would be taken up by Pragya.
Okay.
Thank you, Faiz. Good evening, sir. Thank you for coming. As you already mentioned about Facebook, there has been this the short film named The Social Dilemma, which actually created dilemma in our mind. So related to that, I would have been asking you a question that, what do you feel? What is your take on that? The personal data which the tech gains like Google and Facebook, they record. And do you think that these companies are actually utilizing the analytics in the total potential? Because there is an enormous amount of data which they collect every day from us.
Good question, Pragya. So perhaps, these days, checking a box saying that you have read and understood a website's privacy policy is about as legitimate as a knockoff sale which happens on the roadside. We don't even bother to read the privacy policy or any other terms and conditions on any website. We simply check it because we know if we don't check that box, we will not be able to proceed to the next step. And most likely you don't have a legal background to actually even understand the privacy policy. And no one has that time. No one will have the time to read n number of pages of that policy, or the patience or energy to try and parse that what data websites are storing and how they're using to their advantage. I have read the privacy policies of Facebook, Twitter, Amazon, Apple, and Google to find out the data big tech companies have on us. And the results might surprise you. As far as logging the most of our data goes, the prize goes to Google, which isn't surprising as their entire business is based on data. And perhaps the best company for our privacy is Apple, which only keeps the data needed to uphold our account. That's it. Twitter and Facebook both keep more information than they have, although with Facebook it's mostly the data that we have entered ourselves. Amazon lies beneath Apple in terms of privacy. In my opinion, that's because their site isn't as dependent on advertising revenue as Google, Facebook, and Twitter. That's the reason. And when it comes to personal data, it's extremely difficult to identify unlawful collection amongst legitimate collections because multiple factors need to be considered, including the context in which the data is collected, the methodology used to obtain user consent, and the country-specific laws as well. And also it's almost impossible to know if user data is being misused within company bounds or is in business-to-business interactions. Despite ongoing public outcry to protect online privacy, we witnessed the Cambridge Analytica scandal, in which a third-party company was able to gather personal information of millions of Facebook users and use it for political campaign. And we know what happened next. Both Amazon and Apple were reported to be using human annotators to listen to personal conversations recorded via their respective digital assistants like Alexa and Siri. And the trade-off between data that we give access and we get the services may not be worth it. But another breed of business amasses, there's a new set of intermediary which is evolving, which analyzes and sells the information without giving anything at all, and they are called as data brokers. These firms compile information from publicly available sources like property records, marriage licenses, marriage records, court cases, etc. And they also gather medical records, browsing history, social media connections, and online purchase history as well. And depending on where you live, data brokers might even purchase your information from Department of Transport, as an example. Whether you have a driving license or not, if you do, which car do you own, what's the make, etc. Perhaps there's a very simple app on Play Store and even Apple's App Store as well, where you can simply punch the vehicle number and it gives the information about the vehicle, the owner, when was the vehicle purchased, who is the insurance provider for that vehicle. And I think that's ridiculous. And personal data is also used by AI researchers to train their automated programs. Every day, users around the globe upload billions of photographs, videos, texts, photographs and audio clips to sites like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That media is then fed to machine learning algorithms so that they can learn to see what's in a photograph or automatically determine whether a post violates Facebook's hate speech policy. Your selfies are literally making the robots smarter. And congratulations. Back to you.
Sir, now this was related to the personal data which we have decided to give them even after knowing. But there is this one part we are very conscious about, that is our banking. So how are these concerns handled by the sectors like banking and insurance?
Let's take a step back. In 2017, there is a company called Equifax, and Equifax data breach costed it around $425 million. Statistically, financial services institutions are 300 times more likely to be attacked other than any sector, underscoring the need for financial services and banking organizations to safeguard their data. The criticality of the data stored by the banks in the form of PAN number, Aadhaar number, credit card details, credit, transactions, and other personally identifiable information can really cause chaos and if the data falls in wrong hands. But the banking industry is no stranger to the ill effects of losing data. Regulatory non-compliance, loss of credibility, and the resultant monetary impact are all driving factors behind their need for safe data backup strategies. Few important considerations of data protection and around the importance of privacy of such protected data, which should be prevalent or which are already prevalent, are the first is regulation. One consideration, and it's a very strong consideration, which is the regulated environment. Banking sector is perhaps the most highly regulated industry in the world. Apart from regulations specific to the banking vertical, general geography specific regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley, GDPR also apply, and not to mention compliances such as PCI DSS, which is for the payments. And the need to protect data, retain it for prescribed periods, and prove compliance is probably the highest in this industry. And the penalties for non-compliance is also very, very stiff. Newer regulations are holding banks more and more accountable for data breaches, losses, and that trend is unlikely to change in the short term. GDPR, which is the newest in the line of regulations, came into effect in 2018 and comes down very heavily on organizations by fining as much as 20 million euros, which is equivalent to 17.5 million pounds, or 4% of the global annual revenue, whichever is greater. That's a big money. There is also an insider threat. The first instinct of most security teams is to safeguard against external threats. An often overlooked factor is that one of the major risks to crucial data comes from the inside. Insider threats may not necessarily be malicious. Employees are human and can make errors, as simple as that. But the fact that they are trusted actors and are on the inside makes their actions highly significant and vulnerable vectors for data loss. Employees have direct access and indirect access to assets that drive cash flows, competitive advantages or disadvantages, and shareholder value as well. And any accidental or malicious action can put that important data to risk. A Forrester research report recently said that the greatest volume of security breaches come from employees inadvertently misusing the data. And that statistics is food for thought while managing or designing the data security plan for an organization. Back to you.
So this was all about what we have learned about online information, which has gained popularity now. But there is a thing called offline privacy as well. We have this surveillance data being collected everywhere, especially in case of retails. So what do you think? Should the customer consent be taken before using such data when it comes to offline mode?
Well, indirectly, customer consent is taken each time. And if you're talking specifically as an example for a video surveillance, wherever you enter such area, there is a placard or there's a board which mentions you are under video surveillance, and that's put by law. The reason is you need to be informed. If you don't want to be under video surveillance, you should not be entering that area. That's what the law defines. And data privacy is on top of mind for retailer information security, compliance and risk management officers as well. And for good reason. Data breaches and compliance violations can tarnish a retailer's reputation and can lead to steep regulatory and costly lawsuits as well. Across the world, regulators are expanding data privacy rules to protect consumers and give individuals more control over their personal information. GDPR is one. There is another such law called CCPA, which is California Consumer Privacy Act, and they have a significant impact on how businesses gather and manage consumer data, specifically offline data. We often come across, as I said, signs which says you are under CCTV surveillance, and we have accepted it as a new normal because we walk into that environment. The easy availability and affordability of CCTV cameras has extended its use from public places to individual apartments and buildings as well. And more often, the people under surveillance are not even aware of the eyes watching them. With the mushrooming video surveillance in the country, it becomes pertinent to ask, why am I being watched? And that's a very right question. And the privacy concerns related to video surveillance through CCTV cameras are multifaceted, and its functioning and the stakeholders play a key role. The video footage captured through an array of CCTV cameras installed is subsequently transported securely to a storage device. And in between this process, the data is monitored to allow restricted access. This process involves four major stakeholders: the owner who is responsible for video surveillance, the operator company which operates the entire surveillance system, people who are under surveillance, and most importantly, the government which regulates and monitors the entire system via legislation. And this elaborate scheme of video surveillance has a potential of being abused at many levels in absence of any privacy safeguards. Back to you.
So now we know that we have offline, online, data is everywhere, privacy is needed. So I guess then there must be a need for data protection wing as well. So what do you think? Do all the businesses today need a data protection wing? And if yes, then how they can take care of all the privacy concerns that they might face? How would they shape them all?
Well, to be honest, organizations are already starting to sort of comply with the upcoming data protection law as well. And with data now trading as a valuable currency, compliance to the bill will be obvious priority for organizations. However, the question is an organization's readiness to adopt the relevant data compliance frameworks. Are they prepared to become compliant? Are they capable of keeping up with the changing privacy norms? Do they have sufficient resources to make relevant changes to their business practice? Organizations need to be prepared to respond to this policy change and have to be agile when updating their business policies. It is important for organizations to look at the proposed bill as evolution, not revolution, is what I would say. And most organizations will face data breach at some point with a strong possibility that they will be costly to the business. To mitigate the potential cost and damage, it's important to know the steps the organization should take to avoid a breach. And some of these steps are: one, of course, the network should be isolated to stop attack from spreading, if at all there is an attack. The second is, if there is a breach, assess the loss. What information has been compromised? Is that information retrievable? Does the organization have an uncompromised backup that they will be able to access to restore systems, etc.? Investigate if there is a breach. How did the breach occur? Work with the law enforcement agency, depending on the laws governing the country where the company is based. And of course, have a legal team in place, which is very important. Back to you.
So you mentioned a lot of things which a company has to think before getting into and finding a data protection wing. So that means research plays a very vital role. So my next follow-up question would be, how can big data analytics be used for the extensive research to keep up with the data privacy?
Well, predictably, there are different views. Some say big data analytics challenges fundamental privacy protections, while others argue data privacy requirements are a barrier to the fruits of advanced analytics. But neither of the arguments resolves anything. A new solution is needed, one in which the interests and objectives of both innovation and privacy can be met. And the view held in some quarters that privacy stifles innovation is as dated and flawed as the notion that privacy must be sacrificed for innovation. In fact, the opposite is true. Privacy drives innovation because it forces innovators to think creatively and find solutions that can serve multiple functionalities. I believe it is entirely possible to achieve privacy in the big data era while using analytics to unlock new insights using research and innovation to move organizations forward. In my view, compliance-based approaches to privacy protection tend to focus on addressing privacy breaches after the fact. Instead, I recommend that organizations build privacy protections to their technology, business strategies, and operational processes to prevent breaches before they happen. And fortunately, there is already a framework for doing just that. One of the most widely recognized approaches to protect or proactive privacy is privacy by design, or PBD. And implementing this framework can result in changes to governance structures, operational and strategic objectives, roles and accountabilities, policies, information systems, and data flows, decision-making process, relationships with stakeholders, and even an organization's culture as well. And it's no flash in the pan theory. Either privacy by design has been endorsed by many public and private sector authorities in the US, the European Union, and many other countries as well. These include the US White House, Federal Trade Commission, Department of Homeland Security, Government Accountability Office, European Commission, and many other government bodies as well. Additionally, international privacy and data protection authorities unanimously endorsed privacy by design as an international standard for privacy. Back to you.
Thank you so much, sir. We got to know a lot of things today, and there will be one question which would be related to students like us, that what would be the kind of courses you would recommend to us, looking at the thing that we want to explore the same related to analytics and stuff, and what can be the expected trends when it comes to employment. So what would be your advice for the upcoming batches?
Yep, my favorite question. Well, the concept of big data has been around for a while now. Big data is no more a new or a surprising term. But the last few years have seen a sizable swell in the interest and media attention. And several sectors have already demonstrated the potential of what can be achieved through data analytics. Some NGOs, for example, have been using artificial intelligence to fundraise by collecting data on their supporters and using this to predict the target actions and messaging, which are most likely to resonate with different types of donors. In sports, as an example, analysts have been a regular feature for several years now, using statistics in their operations both on and off pitch in order to make better scouting decisions and monitor the player's health, fitness, and nutrition. In healthcare sector, as an example, hospitals have been collecting realms of health data to improve patient care. In fact, 47% of hospitals in the US are already using predictive analytics to cut costs and predict operating room and staffing demands. Some experts even believe that big data will enable hospitals not just to cure diseases, but also to prevent in the future as well. If you pursue a career as a data analyst, the first thing to get straight is that your role isn't the same as a data engineer or a data scientist. These roles work on technical side of data mining and data storage, whereas data analysts pull relevant bits of information from enormous databases in order to inform decisions in a number of business areas like HR, marketing, finance, customer service, operations, etc. And I would say a degree in data analytics would impart you with important transferable skills, such as project management, critical thinking, problem solving, and open up opportunities across industries as data managers, consultants, and many other roles as well. And I think it's important for you to have the clarity in terms of what's the difference between a data analyst, a business intelligence analyst, data visualizer, data analytics manager. So if you're starting a career in data analytics, holding a data analytics certificate will provide you with a lot of great options. A data analyst can advance his or her career to business analyst, ops manager, senior business analyst, and many more roles as well. Back to you.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking up all the questions. Now I would like to close the session by presenting the vote of thanks. I, Kanika Bhatia, on behalf of ABC and IIM Amritsar Fraternity, extend a hearty vote of thanks to Dr. Anish Agarwal for gracing this session of Qubit with his presence. It has been a privilege to host you, sir. This has been a very refreshing session packed with valuable insights that will surely help us going forward. I would take this opportunity to thank the audience for their engagement throughout the session. Once again, we thank you, sir, for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was lovely to interact with all of you. Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.